Meet Marco, a professional goalkeeper who came to us lacking a week-to-week structure, fatigued from his regular workout routines, and most of all, feeling like he was not performing at his best. Honestly, he just had enough, and that is exactly when he reached out to me. And in today's video, I want to dive exactly into the exact process, A to Z, on exactly how it took him from this low point in his career to performing at his absolute best in just 120 days. Now, when an athlete comes in and starts working with us, they all get access to this custom dashboard. Now, obviously, I've had to block out some stuff because that wouldn't be fair to the athletes who actually pay for the stuff, but this is exactly what it looks like. So once we've got him all set up with the dashboard, we tend to split our athletes' time with us up into 3 pillars: mental, physical, and recovery. So before we even take a look at what his training could look like, we have to make sure his Marco mentality is dialed in. Like I said, so important to the fact that we don't even touch his program until we have this in check. And the foundation to all of this is our built-in habit tracker. Here we can track things like water intake, recovery, and sleep quality. This usually varies from athlete to athlete, but things like screen time can also be tracked, so an athlete can aim to be under 2 hours a day, for example. Because all of these things can honestly have such a big impact on the day-to-day life of the athlete, and it can literally improve so much. And whatever we don't measure, we can improve. So making sure that these small habits are in check, it may seem invisible, but it's actually so important that we start tracking them daily. Now, when an athlete can see patterns in their behavior, whether it be good or bad, it gives us not only awareness, but it gives them awareness too of what's actually holding them back. For example, when we look back and see 3 weeks straight of solid sleep, 2 weeks of hitting those hydration goals, and consistent mobility work, then they feel momentum. And this momentum will compound into confidence in exactly what they're doing. So the mental aspect has been taken care of. Now it's time to look at how we actually structure Marco's work in a weight room. So firstly, we take Marco's baseline form. This allows us to look at Marco's starting data in full. Things like his weight, his body fat, what his past and present training look like. And throughout the 16 weeks, this will be our North Star of when it comes to evaluating the work of what we're doing with him and where we want to go. So then we'll start to build out his program with a huge emphasis on speed work, and we try to pull him away from the bodybuilding approach, like the heavy lifting and all the extra junk volume. Once we build out his initial program, this is honestly where most coaches do stop when it comes to working with athletes, right? So we usually pull back the layers a few steps further, and the truth is our program basically never stays the same throughout the 4 months for a few reasons and factors, such as maybe heavy week-to-week team schedules, injuries obviously, and illnesses that can happen, maybe overall burnouts and plateaus that can have a huge impact on an athlete's ability to train in a given week. So these 3 factors are really important and are the reasons that the program never stays the same, right? We're huge on adaptability, so we like to adjust accordingly and make the things fully customized to the athlete, rather than just forcing a program or forcing things onto the athlete and especially into their life, right? So lastly, there's literally no point in us building this out for Marco if we don't also have his nutrition and his recovery dialed in. So trust me, I've spent years in this space and I've seen it more than I care to admit. Athletes training overtrained or athletes training sleep deprived is just going nowhere, right? So it's really important for us that we dial these things in. Now, thinking something like a cold shower would fix all their struggles, or an athlete that isn't putting enough emphasis on the recovery, I'm so sorry, but you're fucked. So again, we take Marco's nutrition baselines. How much calories is he eating? How much carbs is he getting in? How is his protein? How often is he eating? All these things matter. And once we got him set up with a custom meal planner, he will barely have to lift a finger when it comes to nutrition. So he can literally just follow the nutrition planner inside of this dashboard. So once we have Marco set up with everything, we move on to the development phase. Now this usually spans from around 2 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on the athlete. So we spend quite a large portion of our time together in this phase. By now, we have Marco's initial data dialed in. We know when his schedule is going to be heavy and when we're going to have a little more time to work with him. So this is where we really begin to dial in what's working for him. But in this phase, we usually do uncover some small issues. High-level athletes, more often than not, they run into phases of poor sleep, stress, just general fatigue. So we need to keep track of this stuff as well. And the way we do that is by getting Marco set up with a Whoop band. Now, if you don't know what that actually is, It's basically a band that we can use to track things like sleep data and also Marco's stress, strain levels, and fatigue. So from this data, we can then keep track of exactly what is going on in Marco's day-to-day life, and everything is tracked and individualized. For example, his recovery score. If his recovery score is in the green, then we know, okay, we can really push the load and the volume. Things like do things like high velocity sprints, intense plyo work. Perfect if everything is green. Alternatively, if we look and he's in the amber, then okay, we need to pull back a little bit, reduce the workload by around 20% and move on from there. And lastly, if we find him in the red, then we know really that we need to halt what he's doing, potentially take him off, take him on a call, and run through what's actually going on, right? So you might also be thinking, what benefit does this actually give to Marco? Well, we can actually see faster and more effective strength and performance gains because each workout now is maximalized and it's optimized, right? We can reduce injury, which is also a huge one. Marco can stay healthy, train more days, and avoid injuries as a result of overtraining or burnout. Now, he may also see better recovery quality because we're consulting with him on how to sleep better and how to recover better. And lastly, when it comes to nutrition, we can also show him how his food choices impact recovery. And as a result, the athlete becomes someone who trains smarter, performs better, recovers faster, and just performs way better overall as an athlete and better than ever before. Now, at this stage, we'll also really start dialing down on his training metrics. Everything from his weights, his sets, and his reps is tracked using our app called Train Heroic. Disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by them, but if they are watching, I'm definitely not opposed to the idea. This obviously means we have measurable data to look back at and make absolute certain that we're seeing the adaptations that happen in every single training session, right? So on top of all that, around the week 2 mark, we got Marco on for his first check-in call. We usually do these at the end of every week. We'll run through the things like training bottlenecks, how he's feeling, what his data is actually looking like, and just any questions that he has in general or that I might have for him. So with all this info, we can now adjust his training for the next week accordingly. So here we move into the scale phase. This usually lasts from around week 8 to week 12, so just a small 4-week period. The main aim here isn't to reinvent the wheel, because by how we've seen what works for Marco and what he's getting the best results from, we just want to scale on what's already worked for him. So with his data integration, week-to-week structure, recovery and nutrition and lifestyle optimization, all stored within the dashboard. Like I said, this phase is really simple because by now Marco has already seen some pretty insane results. So some things that we tend to avoid changing are his core habits, his training frequency, and his nutrition fundamentals. And some things we may want to change around a little are his intensity or volume, stack more advanced habits maybe, or make sure that he locks in on them harder and therefore keeps pushing his discipline, and more so just general refinements rather than overhauls. And like I said, this can only add to the results that he's been seeing so far. So basically, we're not rebuilding anything from scratch because we know exactly what moves the needle by this point. Programs becomes predictable, right? So after just 12 weeks, we managed to see a 20 kilo gain on his RDL and his box step-ups. We went from 34 to 58 kilograms, just to name a few, right? So after around 12 weeks, we step into our 4th and final working phase with Marco. Here we take on one last look at the goals he set from the start and his baseline, and take a look at if he accomplished them by now or if he's on track to do so. In this case, Marco had absolutely smashed those goals, so congrats to him. But what I want to do is take you guys throughout our troubleshooting guide on the off chance an athlete is falling behind on those goals. So like I said, we can guarantee our athletes are getting to the level they'd want to be after the first 16 weeks. So in this case, if Marco was in theory falling behind on those goals, because we have everything tracked, we can go back to our 3 pillars, and more than likely, at least one of these would be off. If it's his mindset, we try to break the last couple weeks into small chunks, as in daily wins rather than weekly. If he's struggling in the weight room, we again try to get him those small wins on the table, maybe try and micro-load his way back up. Set intensity standards. Usually more often than not, athletes have much more left in the tank than they expect. And lastly, we try to break up the nutrition and recovery side of things and set a simple 3-phase structure in place. We might also temporarily switch up the macros for a few days to give them that boost that they need, Water intake is something to keep an eye on here as well. But the most important factor is the work we've done over the past 12 weeks. Is it actually transferring to their performance? If the answer is not quite as they would have expected, then this usually comes down to, again, a simple couple of factors. Either recovery isn't matching post-game or training, they are underfueling on game day, or maybe training just isn't targeted enough. So with the Whoop data, all of these are easily fixable. Like I said, it's literally our North Star when we're fixing metrics that might be off. Here, we'd usually take the athlete on an hour-long troubleshooting call where we run through the problem and why it might be happening. We might run through what a one-week solution might look like, implementation of new strategies, and then review the performance standards. And like I said, everything from week 1 to week 16 is tracked to an incredibly high standard. Every detail from sleep and nutrition to training intensity is monitored to the point where we can even see if the smallest detail is off. So we know exactly where we're going wrong. This is near enough guarantees that our athletes see the results that they want. And this is exactly what we did for Marco. And finally, we take our flight plan to review this progress and map out the next steps. Basically, here we set new goals and rinse and repeat the process. If you guys have any questions about the whole process, or if you have been struggling with something similar as Marco did, then don't hesitate to DM me on Instagram. I'll be happy to help out. The link should be down in the description.